Hello, and welcome to week 4 of Reason and Persuasion. And this week, I want to talk a bit about definitions of words and language in general. But before I get into that, I just want to say a word of warning, put a condition on it. Textbooks on reasoning and argumentation usually have a chapter on language early on, as is the case with the book we're using, the Voice of Reason, because they tend to assume that arguments are all made with words, that you have to have an understanding of language and how language works and how to speak clearly before you can argue. And you can see that's sensible, but I think it's important to note that arguments aren't made of words only, always. You can make arguments using diagrams. In mathematics, it's very common to make arguments using diagrams as well as language and language-like symbols. You can do physical experiments, right? You can think of scientific experiments as being arguments of a kind. And the crucial thing in a scientific experiment is to do something to some piece of matter, right? You spray your electrons or collect your astronomical data or whatever it is, right? So you're doing something that isn't just linguistic. To prove that something is physically possible, you could just do it, and that would be an irresistible argument. So if somebody says, convince me that it's possible to take that table through that doorway. So you could make the best possible argument, namely you could, without uttering a word, take the table through the doorway, and that would be a pretty irresistible argument that wouldn't involve language at all. Nevertheless, most arguments do involve language. So let's follow Porter's chapter. What you'll get is essentially Porter's chapter on language plus some philosophical embellishments from me to push up the philosophical level a bit. Okay, so if you're following the slides, so words for concepts. Cow, justice, democracy, philosophy. Well, these generally have 3 parts. There's the extension, there's the intention, and the connotation. So the extension is the list of things that the concept correctly applies to, right? So, for example, the concept of creature with a heart. The concept of a creature with a heart applies to the following list. Tony Blair, Clever Hans the Counting Horse, Lassie, the bird that's in the tree outside my house, the rats on the underground, my cat, Skippy the bush kangaroo, and so on, right? Long list of creatures that have hearts. Now consider the list of creatures that have kidneys. Well, here's an indicative list. Tony Blair, Clever Hans the Counting Horse, Lassie, the bird outside my house, the rats on the underground, my cat, Skippy the bush kangaroo, and so on. It's the same list, right? The list of objects that belong to the concept creature with a heart is the same as the list of things that belong to the concept creature with kidneys. So those 2 concepts have the same extension. They are said to be co-extensional. Right? Co-extensional. So that's the extension of a concept. It's all the things that it's true of. So why are they different concepts? Right? Creature with a heart, creature with kidneys. They apply to, those 2 concepts apply to the same list of things. But they're different concepts. You could conceive of a creature with a heart but without kidneys somehow. Well, because they have different intentions. And note the spelling, we're talking about intention with an S rather than intention with a T. So the intention is, if you like, the conceptual content that attaches to the word. And that can be different even if the concepts apply to the same things. Then you've got connotation. So connotation is the emotional and cultural associations that go with a word. So for example, somebody might say so-and-so is slim or svelte. You might say of the same person that they're skinny or scrawny, right? The descriptive content is the same. I mean, the body shape that you associate with those words, skinny, svelte, slender, scrawny, it's pretty much the same. You're saying the same thing factually, but the emotional and evaluative and cultural associations are different. You'd much rather be svelte and slender than skinny or scrawny. Certainly don't want to be scrawny. And there are cultural associations. So, for example, my driving teacher used to use old Air Force slang. So he'd talk about prangs. If you crash the car and damage it, that for him is a prang. That pilots used to talk about pranging planes. So he would say, let's try not to have a prang. The police would talk about an RTA, a road traffic accident. It's the same event, it's the same thing, it's one car knocking into another, but different user groups, different cultural connotations, right? For me to use the word prang in the way that he did, well, I think it would be a sentimental archaism, to use a phrase from George Orwell that we saw a couple of weeks back. Okay, so that's connotation. So that's our three elements of meaning that you get imported. There's the extension, the intention, and the connotation. So that's pretty straightforward.